Throughout history, Islam and other religions, especially Christianity, have sometimes gotten along and sometimes clashed. From the early meetings in the 600s to today, pushback against Islam has shown up in different ways, changing countries and affecting millions of people. This video looks at why this pushback happened, talking about important events and problems Muslims have faced around the world. Knowing why this pushback happened helps us understand today's complicated world. From the Crusades to talks about separating religion from government, these past events still affect how different religions see each other and how Islam is seen in the West. By looking at these things, we can better understand the problems and chances we have to build a more welcoming and peaceful world. The reasons for the pushback against Islam are often tied to politics, society, and money. When Islamic empires grew in the Middle Ages, while they were mostly tolerant and shared cultures, there were also fights and takeovers. This left a mark on both the Islamic world and the West. These past events still affect how people see things today, so it's important to talk about this carefully and understand the past. Islam, starting in the 600s, was a big change in the world. Starting in Arabia, Islam spread quickly, bringing different groups together under one belief and creating a huge empire in just 100 years. This growth meant Muslims met other groups like the Byzantine and Persian empires, leading to both teamwork and fighting. Early meetings between Muslims and Christians were complicated. Sometimes they lived together peacefully and shared cultures. Muslim rulers often let Christians and Jews follow their own religions, mostly freely, but with some rules. This tolerance came from the Islamic idea of dhimmi, which protected people with single-god religions under Islamic rule. But there were also problems, especially where groups wanted the same land or power. Taking Jerusalem in 638, a holy city for both Muslims and Christians, was a big moment, while early Muslim rulers respected the city's importance to different religions. Later fights like the Crusades made Jerusalem a center of religious rivalry. It's important to remember that the early Islamic takeovers, while fast and world-changing, weren't only about religion. Money problems, fights between tribes, and wanting political power were also important reasons. Understanding these complicated reasons helps us see this time in history more clearly. The Crusades, religious wars fought by European Christians against Muslims from the 1000s to the 1200s, changed how Christians and Muslims saw each other. Driven by a mix of strong religious feelings, wanting political power and wanting money, the Crusades left a big mark on both the Islamic world and the West. The Crusades started because the Seljuk Turks took over Anatolia, which threatened the Byzantine Empire and the paths people took to holy places. The Crusades led to Crusader states in the Levant. These states, which didn't last long, still changed the area, bringing Western European ways of life, laws and buildings. But the Crusades also caused lots of violence and death. Taking Jerusalem in 1099, with the terrible killing of many Muslims and Jews living there, is still a symbol of the cruelty and religious intolerance of that time. The Crusades made people distrust and dislike each other, shaping how they saw each other and making people suspicious and afraid for a long time. While the Crusades are often seen as a simple fight between different cultures, it's more complicated than that. Christians and Muslims sometimes worked together and shared cultures during this time, and it wasn't always fighting. Also, it's important to remember that the Crusades happened because of a mix of religious, political, and money reasons. And seeing it as a simple fight between good and evil isn't historically accurate. Today, pushback against Islam looks different, often showing up as unfair laws and treatment. Muslims in many places face problems like limits on their religious practices or being kept out of public life. These problems often come from old prejudices, politicians using the situation to their advantage, and worries about national identity. One big example is growing Islamophobia, which is an irrational fear or prejudice against Islam and Muslims. This has gotten worse since 9/11 and other terrorist attacks, which some politicians have used to make people dislike Muslims. This has led to more hate crimes, unfair laws, and suspicion towards Muslims in many Western countries. Legal barriers to practicing Islam are different everywhere, from limits on building mosques to banning some Islamic clothing. In some countries, laws seem to target Muslims, like those limiting wearing face veils in public. These laws are often said to be for security or to separate religion from government, but many Muslims see them as unfair and against their religious freedom. These laws and prejudices affect Muslim communities a lot. Muslims often feel left out and face discrimination in jobs, housing, and education. This can make them feel hopeless and angry, which can sometimes lead to radicalization and extremism. Fixing these problems needs many solutions, including changing laws, teaching people about Islam, and encouraging talks between religions to promote understanding and tolerance. Section 5. Social shame and Islamophobia. Besides unfair laws, Muslims around the world also face social shame and Islamophobia in everyday life, creating fear and exclusion. This prejudice can be subtle, like negative portrayals of Muslims in the media, or obvious, like verbal harassment or physical violence. One of the worst kinds of Islamophobia is when bad stereotypes are applied to all Muslims. The actions of a few are used to make an entire religion and its followers seem dangerous or like they don't fit in with Western values. This ignores the diversity of the Muslim world and makes people suspicious and afraid. This social shame can deeply affect Muslims, making them feel isolated, unsafe, and like they don't belong. It can also make it harder to fit in and succeed, as Muslims might face discrimination in housing, education, and jobs. Fighting Islamophobia requires a group effort from people and organizations. Education is key to challenging stereotypes and promoting understanding. Media needs to report on Islam and Muslims fairly and avoid exaggerating and generalizing. Also, encouraging conversations between religions and creating chances for people from different communities to meet can help break down barriers and build understanding. Section 6 case study, France and the talks about separating religion from government. France, with its long history of separating religion from government and its large Muslim population, is a good example of the challenges of including Islam in a secular society. The French idea of laïcité, which stresses separating religion from public life, has been central to many debates about how Islam is seen in French society. One of the most debated issues has been wearing religious symbols, especially the Islamic headscarf in public schools. France banned wearing obvious religious symbols in state schools in 2004, causing protests and debates about religious freedom versus secular values. People who supported the ban said it was needed to uphold laïcité and keep things neutral in public. But critics said the law unfairly targeted Muslim women and violated their right to express their religion. They said the ban made negative stereotypes worse and fueled Islamophobia by making Muslim women seem like a threat to French identity. The debate about the headscarf in France reflects bigger worries about how Islam fits into Western societies and the challenges of balancing religious freedom with secular ideas. France's experience shows how hard it is to deal with religious diversity in a secular setting. Finding a balance between respecting religious freedom and upholding secular values is tricky, needing open conversations, understanding each other, and being willing to consider different views. Section 7. The role of government and groups. Not part of the government. Governments and groups not part of the government play a big role in either making things easier or harder for Muslims in different countries. Government policies can either promote inclusion and equality or create barriers and fuel discrimination. Similarly, groups not part of the government, including religious groups, media, and community organizations, can create tolerance and understanding or continue negative stereotypes and prejudice. Sometimes, governments have done good things to fight Islamophobia and help Muslims fit in. This includes making laws against discrimination, giving money to Muslim community groups, and encouraging talks between religions. But sometimes governments have made policies that seem discriminatory and Islamophobic, like banning some Islamic clothing or making it hard to build mosques. Groups not part of the government also play a big role. For example, media needs to report fairly and accurately about Islam and Muslims, avoiding sensational stories and harmful generalizations. Religious leaders can help people from different religions understand each other and challenge prejudice. Community organizations can work to fight discrimination, help people fit in, and support the rights of all citizens, no matter their religion. Solving the problems Muslims face around the world needs many solutions involving both government policies and everyday people's efforts. Promoting education, encouraging conversations, and fighting discrimination at all levels of society are crucial for a fairer world for everyone. Section 8. Effects on Muslim communities and fitting in. The challenges and discrimination Muslims face globally have greatly affected Muslim communities and how they feel they belong. Experiencing prejudice and exclusion can make people feel alienated, marginalized, and like they are treated differently. This can make it harder to fit in and succeed. Young Muslims especially might find it hard to balance their religious identity with belonging in a society where they often face prejudice and discrimination. This can make them feel disappointed and frustrated, possibly making them more open to radicalization and extremism. It's important to realize that Islamophobia and discrimination affect more than just individuals. They can divide society, weaken social bonds, and prevent Muslims from fully participating in civic life. This not only hurts Muslim communities, but also prevents society from benefiting from the contributions and talents of many people. Creating a more inclusive and fair society requires addressing the root causes of prejudice and discrimination. This includes promoting education, challenging stereotypes, and encouraging interfaith dialogue. It also requires ensuring everyone has equal opportunities, no matter their religion, and creating a society where everyone feels like they belong and are respected. Section 9. Conclusion. Looking at a complicated future. The relationship between Islam and the West, with both times of working together and times of conflict, continues to be important in the 2000s. Understanding the history of pushback against Islam, from the Crusades to modern-day Islamophobia, is crucial for dealing with today's complicated world and building a more peaceful and inclusive future. Solving the problems Muslims face around the world needs many solutions. Governments need to protect religious freedom, fight discrimination, and promote integration. Groups not part of the government, including media, religious institutions, and community organizations, are important in shaping public discussion, fostering understanding, and challenging prejudice. Ultimately, building understanding and respect requires recognizing that we are all human and embracing the richness and diversity of human experience. By promoting education, encouraging dialogue, and challenging injustice, we can create a world where everyone, no matter their religion, feels like they belong and can contribute to a shared future.